Hi everyone, welcome back to the Anna-losophy podcast. Around this time of year, a lot of us are heading back to school. That means new classes, new teachers, new people, and that slightly strange feeling of starting another year all over again. Right now, personally, I'm in 10th grade, which I honestly can't believe. But the beginning of a school year always makes me think about how quickly we form opinions about the people around us, especially when we don't know them very well yet. That's what made me think about Wonder. For me, I read the book and watched the movie, and I think both are very interesting because they tell the story of Augie Pullman, a boy with a facial difference who starts attending school after being homeschooled for most of his life. His first year at school brings friendship, bullying, family problems, and a lot of moments where the people around him have to think about the way they treat others. But the story also moves beyond Augie's perspective and shows us what other characters are experiencing, which makes the whole story feel much bigger than just one person's experience at school. For this episode, I want to start with a short summary of the story and the important events that happened to Augie as well as the people around him. Then we'll get into the philosophy behind Wonder, especially the way we judge people, how much appearances affect the way we treat someone, and whether being kind is simply about being nice, or whether it asks a lot more from us. Finally, I'll bring everything back to school and talk about what Wonder can actually teach us as we start another school year. So, with a new school year beginning, let's talk about Wonder. Wonder follows August, or Augie Pullman, a boy with a facial difference who has been homeschooled for most of his life. His parents have always protected him no matter what, and helped him through the many surgeries he has had, but eventually they decide that he is ready to experience school. Augie starts 5th grade at Beecher Prep, and before his first day, the principal, Mr. Tushman, introduces him to 3 students who are supposed to show him around: Jack Will, Charlotte, and Julian. Augie immediately notices here that people react differently to him because of his face, and starting school becomes a much bigger challenge than simply getting used to a new classroom. At school, Augie constantly has to deal with students staring at him, whispering about him, and making many assumptions about him without knowing anything. He does make friends with Jack Will and Summer Dawson, who eventually become important parts of his life at school. Summer, for example, chooses to sit with him at lunch even when other students avoid him, while Jack becomes close enough to Augie that they begin spending time together outside of school. Their friendship, though, becomes just a bit complicated when Augie overhears Jack saying something incredibly hurtful about him. Jack had been trying to fit in with Julian and the crowd as a whole, who constantly make cruel comments about Augie and encourages other students to exclude him. Augie is deeply hurt and stops speaking to Jack, but Jack eventually realizes what he has done and apologizes because he understands that being accepted by Julian wasn't worth losing a true friend. As the school year continues, Augie slowly becomes more comfortable at Beecher Prep. He begins to feel like he genuinely belongs there, instead of feeling like everyone is watching him or judging him. At the same time, Julian continues treating him badly, and the conflict eventually becomes so serious that the adults at school have to get involved in the situation. Augie's situation also shows how difficult it can be for people to stand up for someone when doing so might make them unpopular themselves. Jack here has to decide whether he cares more about fitting in with Julian or being a good friend to Augie, and eventually he chooses the latter. One of the biggest moments happened during a school trip when Augie and Jack encounter older students from another school who make fun of Augie. This time, however, some of their classmates step in and defend him. For Augie, this is incredibly important because the people around him are finally choosing to see him as a friend and a classmate, rather than simply focusing on his appearance. By the end of the year, Augie has built real friendships and become much more confident at school. At the final ceremony, he receives the Henry Ward Beecher Medal for his character, and the people around him recognize how much courage he has shown throughout the year. His first year at school began with him wondering whether he would ever fit in, but it ends with him feeling that he truly belongs in this community. So with that being established, let's move on to the first philosophical question. How much can we really know about a person just by looking at them? Wonder gives us a really good way to explore appearance, judgment, and the difference between seeing someone and actually knowing them. From the moment Augie walks into Beecher Prep, people already have information about him before they've ever spoken to him. They see his face, notice that he looks different, and immediately begin forming opinions. The interesting philosophical problem is that human beings naturally make judgments from what they see, but appearance only gives us a very small fraction of information about who someone really is. This connects to Plato's theory of knowledge, especially his distinction between appearance and reality. So, in essence, Plato thought that what we experience through our senses doesn't always give us the full truth. Something can appear in one way while being another way underneath. In the Republic, Plato uses the allegory of the cave to explain this idea. The prisoners in the cave see shadows on a wall and believe that those shadows are reality because that's all they've ever experienced. Their problem is that they're confusing what they can immediately see what is actually true. Augie's classmates face a much smaller but still meaningful version of this problem. They can see his face immediately, but they can't see everything else, like his fears, the kind of friend he might become, his personality, or his interests. This is why the beginning of Augie's school experience is important, because before Jack, Summer, or Julian really know him, they already have reactions to him. Others avoid him because they don't know how to respond, and some stare because they're surprised by his appearance. Julian goes even further and allows his first impression of Augie to become the very foundation, or the basis for how he treats him. So the problem isn't simply that Julian notices something unusual about Augie's appearance, but more so the philosophical problem is what happens when a limited piece of information becomes the basis for judgment about another person. This also connects to the idea of epistemology. This is the branch of philosophy that studies knowledge. One of its central questions is, how do we know what we know? When someone looks at Augie and thinks they understand him, what evidence do they actually have? I mean, yeah, they know what he looks like, they may know that he's had surgery, they may notice that other students react differently to him. But none of these pieces of information really tells them what kind of person he is. They haven't yet seen how he treats other people like his friends, how he behaves when someone needs help, what subjects he likes the most, or how he responds when things become a little bit twisted and difficult. The philosopher John Locke, who lived from 1632 to 1704, is a pretty good example here because of his ideas about how human knowledge develops. So, Locke argued against the idea that people are born with fully formed knowledge, and instead emphasized the role of experience in impacting what we know. If we apply that idea to wonder, the students who never met Augie before don't have enough experience with him to know what he's actually like. Sure, their first impression gives them information, but it doesn't give them a complete understanding of who he is. They have to interact with him before their knowledge can become more developed. But this is exactly what happens with Jack and Summer. So at first, they're aware of Augie's appearance just like everyone else, but as they voluntarily spend time with him, their understanding changes because they gain new information. Jack discovers that Augie is pretty funny and someone he genuinely enjoys being around. Summer chooses to sit with them and gradually becomes his friend. Their judgments become based on actual experiences with Augie, as opposed to what they saw when he first walked into the school. This gives us an important distinction between recognizing someone and knowing someone. Recognition happens almost instantly. You can look at a person a couple of times and you would probably notice the clothes that they usually wear, their face, their height, their expressions, or something else about their appearance. Pure knowledge, though, takes a lot longer because it requires more experience. You have to truly listen to someone and the things they say, spend time with them, see how they behave in different situations, and understand that their personality is much larger or more complicated than whatever you noticed first. This idea is especially powerful in Wonder, because the students eventually have the opportunity to see Augie's character through his actions. They indeed discover how he treats other people, how he handles difficult or twisted situations, and how much he cares about the people around him as a whole. The story, therefore, asks us to think very carefully about first impressions. Of course, a first impression can be useful, because human beings need to process information quickly. But there is a very big difference between noticing something and deciding that you understand what it means right away. Seeing Augie's facial difference is an observation. Deciding that he is strange or scary, unfriendly, or somehow less worthy of friendship is an interpretation that might be far-fetched at first. The second step requires assumptions that the first step doesn't necessarily provide. So that's why the pieces of judgment that Augie gets deeply hurts him, because some of the things that people say about him genuinely aren't true. This is where wonder becomes relevant to everyday school life too. Every new school year puts people into situations where they meet classmates they know nothing about. Someone might seem quiet because they're shy, because they're nervous. Maybe they're having a bad day or just rolled on the wrong side of the bed that morning, or because they simply just don't feel comfortable talking yet. Someone might seem confident but actually feel insecure, and the same thing applies to a lot more people. Someone might seem serious but might have a very goofy personality around the people around them. So the first thing we notice can definitely be real based on what they're doing, but our explanation of what that thing means can still not be the whole truth. The deeper philosophical question then is whether appearance gives us knowledge or merely gives us information. Wonder suggests that there is a major difference. Looking at someone can tell us something about what they look like, but it can't give us a complete understanding of who they are. That understanding has to develop through experience. So the question wonder leaves us with is something we can take into the new school year with us. When we meet someone for the first time ever, are we actually seeing the person in front of us, or are we just seeing our own assumptions about them? The second philosophical question is, what do we owe other people when we see them being treated unfairly? So we can see that wonder also raises a question about moral responsibility. It's really easy to think about kindness as something personal. You can choose to be kind because you want to be a good person. But the story makes the question harder by showing what really happens when someone is treated unfairly, and the people around them have to decide whether or not to intervene. So if you see someone being treated badly, do you become responsible for doing something about it? This connects to Aristotle's virtue ethics. Aristotle believed that being a good person involves developing virtues. Virtues are qualities that guide us toward good actions. Courage is one of those virtues, and Aristotle's idea of courage is relevant here. Courage, of course, doesn't simply mean doing something that's scary, or as opposed to ordinary situations you wouldn't do right now. It involves understanding when something is necessary to do, and being willing to act even when there might be something at stake. This makes Jack's situation interesting, because standing up for Augie would cost him his place with Julian and the other students. So that's the point of the story, where he has to decide what kind of person he wants to be when being a good friend becomes very socially difficult. Jack's decision also shows the difference between knowing that something is wrong and actually responding to it. Jack already knows that Julian's behavior toward Augie is cruel. The problem is that knowing something is wrong doesn't automatically make you act against it. There is definitely a moment when social pressure becomes stronger than moral conviction. That's the part of the story where Jack goes along with Julian because he wants to fit in. Later, though, he recognizes that he has allowed that pressure to control him and apologizes to Augie. His development is therefore about more than just becoming nicer, because Jack doesn't change into a good person overnight. Rather, he has to take responsibility for a choice he made when he knew better. This connects to Immanuel Kant, who argued that morality is connected to treating people as having value in themselves. Kant's philosophy really emphasizes the idea that human beings should never ever be treated merely as tools for someone else's purposes. Julian's behavior gives us a clear example of what happens when that principle is gone. Augie becomes a very easy target that Julian can use to gain attention and make other students laugh or increase his own social position, which kind of happened when he did so. Augie's feelings become secondary to what Julian wants from the situation, even if it hurts Augie's feelings. So, this makes kindness more complicated than simply having good intentions. Although intentions matter, consequences matter too. Someone might say that they were only joking and that's what they intended to do, but if their joke genuinely wasn't funny, or if it humiliated another person or was being mean to someone else, the fact that they found it funny doesn't erase the effect it had on the other person. So this approach pushes us to think about what our actions actually do to the people around us. At the same time, wonder shows us that morality is sometimes built through very ordinary choices. Summer sitting beside Augie at lunch is important because she changes what that moment feels like for him. Jack also eventually apologizes, and although he did something that was quite detrimental to Augie's feelings at first, he did own up to that responsibility, and he takes accountability for something that he did. The students who defend Augie during the school trip as well matter because they refuse to allow a situation where Augie is bullied to continue on and on when they have the ability to intervene. This connects also to the philosophical idea of the bystander effect, which became a very, very important area of psychological research. Their research explored why people can sometimes fail to help when other people are with them. When responsibility is spread across a whole group, each individual can feel less personally responsible for acting. Especially in a school environment, where in this school in particular there are a lot of people there, that can become especially powerful. If one person is being mocked, and let's say 40 people are watching that person being mocked, each person can think that someone else will say something and they don't have to say something. But at the same time, all 40 of them might think that, so no one says anything. But Wonder challenges this mindset. The students who eventually defend Augie shows what happens when someone decides that the presence of other people doesn't matter as much, because that doesn't remove their own responsibility, especially because the students who defend Augie were part of Julian's group. This leads us to one of the most important ideas in the story, which is that moral courage can require social courage. Obviously, it's easy to support a person privately. It becomes a lot harder when standing beside them might change how other people see you. And that's the same thing Jack experiences. He definitely wants Augie as a friend, but he also wants Julian's approval. His eventual choice, though, shows that morality sometimes requires accepting a social cost, or a trade-off, if you will, in order to act according to your values. That is something Wonder makes especially relevant to school. A classroom is a small community, and communities develop their own ideas about who is popular, who is respected, who is strange, or who gets left out of what. And those ideas can become pretty influential because people don't want to become the next target. The question, though, is what happens when everyone follows the group simply because everyone else is following it, also called the bandwagon effect. Jack's mistake is important, but what he does after recognizing it matters too. His apology and later choices gives us evidence that he is genuinely changing as a person. So that's why Aristotle would probably say that moments like these are exactly where character develops. Because sometimes the most important moral decision in a school is made by the person standing nearby, the person who genuinely has the ability to decide what happens next. And that brings us to the end of today's episode. So thank you so much for listening to another episode of the Anna-losophy podcast. Whether you're starting a new school year, beginning a new chapter in your life, or simply going through your routine, I hope this episode gave you something to think about. Because no matter how old we are, we're constantly meeting new people, new faces, and forming first impressions. And sometimes the person we think we understand after 5 minutes can turn out to be completely different once we actually get to know them. So thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode of the Anna-losophy podcast. Have a good one!